the Polish capital, Warsaw, as we speak. Let's open this up to our panelists. Joining me on Global Lens tonight is Ambassador Yogesh Gupta, former Indian diplomat, Professor Swaran Singh at the Center for International Politics at the Jawaharlal Nehru University, and in a moment we will be joined by Pramit Pal Chaudhary, Foreign Affairs Analyst at Eurasia Group. Thanks very much, gentlemen, for joining me. Professor Swaran Singh, let me begin with you. There are multiple dimensions to this visit, which is being described as a historic one. Not to mention the fact that this is the first time that an Indian Prime Minister is visiting Poland in 45 years. But would it be correct to view the significance and relevance of this visit, particularly through the prism of the Ukraine conflict? Given Poland's geographical proximity to the war-torn country, the fact that it has helped Ukraine in its military efforts, it's offered a lot of humanitarian assistance to the escaping refugees. Poland also helped India evacuate many of its stranded citizens, especially students, when the war had just erupted in Ukraine back in 2022. Does being a frontline state in this war make Poland a particularly significant player, not just for its NATO allies, but also for India?
Thank you, Neha. I think clearly in this visit of Prime Minister Modi to Poland and Ukraine, of course, world media's focus clearly is on what India is bringing to the table as far as the Ukraine crisis, which has impacted much of the world for the last 2.5 years. That remains the primary focus, but that doesn't in any case, undermine a very unique and strong relationship that India has with Poland. Your initial remarks brought out that uniqueness beautifully, whether it is from the 16th, 17th centuries or it is more during the Cold War or after the Cold War. You remember Gandhi and Nehru were very vocal critiques of both German invasion and Russian Soviet occupation of Poland. Then, of course, India and Poland became very close friends of Soviet Union. After collapse of Cold War, we were both, Poland and India were trying to get closer to Western Europe and United States. So very strong historic relationship here. And important to underline how Poland is the most important key partner of India in economic and defense cooperation in Central Europe. You did mention that from India, most of the time we think of Europe in terms of Western Europe. So in that sense, I think this is an important first stop for Indian Prime Minister to not just reiterate and build forward the bilateral relationship with Poland, but also in that sense get a sense of the ground situation. And of course, Poland was very helpful when India wanted to bring back about 23,000 Indians from the war crisis zone. And of course, Poland was the first country to receive over 1 million refugees. No questions asked from Ukraine, no papers checked, immediately help provided. But it is also interesting to note that lately, just like much of the Western world is facing fatigue, including United States, there is a certain fatigue setting in even in behavior of Poland vis-a-vis Ukraine. Of course, they continue to be strong supporters. And they are the frontline state, as you mentioned, but their own economic interests are getting impacted in that sense, and they have relatively been more cautious lately, which perhaps make it easier for India to now connect with Poland and through Poland then connect with President Zelensky and his team there in Ukraine when he goes to Kiev. So I think it's a very important first stop for Prime Minister's visit to Kiev, which of course will contribute to both India being in know of the ground situation, reevaluating its cost-benefit analysis as to what exactly India can do value add in terms of the peace processes efforts as far as Ukraine crisis are concerned. But I think we should not overlook at all a very significant bilateral relationship that India shares with Poland, and that I think is going to strengthen India's potential in terms of being an important contributor to peacemaking in Ukraine as well.
Okay, that's a very comprehensive analysis. Thanks for that. Ambassador, as we speak, Ambassador, we're looking at live pictures of Prime Minister Narendra Modi at a war memorial in Warsaw. He is scheduled to visit 3 war memorials to, in a sense, pay his tribute to the rich historical ties that the two countries have had, and to honor those Indian soldiers who actually fought alongside the Polish and Allied forces in World War II. Let me, as we continue to look at these pictures that are coming to us live from the war memorials in Warsaw, let me continue this conversation with Professor Swaran Singh. Professor Singh, even if we argue that India has an independent relationship with Poland that has its own historical, cultural, and economic significance, there are many who would insist that, given the timing of this visit, the fact that the Prime Minister is today in Poland and 2 days from now will be in Ukraine, and coming as it does weeks after that very high profile and highly dissected and debated visit to Moscow, where we also saw that hug between Prime Minister Modi and President Vladimir Putin, something that left the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky furious, and there was a lot of commentary on it, critical, if I might add, in the Western press as well. Therefore, looking at the timing of it, many might call it India's balancing act. How do you look at it?
Thank you, Neha, for asking that question to me, because my understanding is slightly at variance from what my esteemed colleague Ambassador Gupta just mentioned. India has seen even the foreign minister Lavrov getting extremely angry with India's participation in quadrilateral security framework. So also when Indian Prime Minister was in Moscow, it just coincided with NATO's summit in Washington, D.C., and we saw President Biden, Secretary of State Blinken, of course their ambassador in New Delhi, making remarks. I think this visit has absolutely, and I'm saying consciously, absolutely nothing to do with how major powers comment on India's behavior. Any great power, when it emerges, will annoy some other countries. You see, so many countries are upset with the United States. I don't think that decides American foreign policy. Likewise, I don't think it is a visit at all driven by any Western angst or anxieties or angers or anything. It's a reflection of India's strategic autonomy, where it is a signal to Russia that India is not bandwagoning Russia or United States. India decides what is in best interest of its own foreign policy, and therefore takes certain steps in where Indian Prime Minister has to go. In fact, India didn't have to wait for the criticism coming from West. The moment the visit to Moscow was announced, among you, several media people were already beginning to speculate, when will Prime Minister now go to Ukraine? You remember that visit to Moscow was preceded by Ukrainian foreign minister being hosted in India. So I think a lot of evaluation and each of these initiatives that Indian Prime Minister takes. And I think in that sense, this is a visit where India wants to take forward its role as a country that has always spoken for peacemaking and peace building around the world. It is just extension of that effort, and that is the language that we heard when Deputy National Security Advisor Pavan Kapoor was recently in Kiev, the Chief of Staff of President Zelensky, and he used the same language that India can make a valuable contribution to the peace process efforts that are in play right now. That's a broad language. I'm hoping Indian Prime Minister's statement from Kiev will be much more specific and give us a little idea as to where India's contribution is going to be and how India is going to play that role in coming times. I agree with the Ambassador about the fatigue on both sides. Both sides may be now looking also for some kind of face saver. And that's a fantastic way of looking at. We have seen peace proposals like 13-point proposal of China being demolished by Western countries, the Swiss peace summit being boycotted by China, by Russia. And we have seen that kind of initiatives don't work at all. So it has to be very snail pace, modest, behind the closed doors kind of effort. And I think that is the approach that India is adopting. And hopefully we will see that India's contributions will become a little more clear when Indian Prime Minister speaks from Kiev. And I think that speech is what is awaited around the world. But I think it's an important relationship with Poland as well. So I think we should not overcast the whole visit in terms of only visit to Kiev. You mentioned of Indian Prime Minister. You mentioned of Indian Prime Minister visiting and meeting soldiers. That again is a strong relationship. It's not just defense cooperation, exchanges and trainings and courses. They have worked together during both world wars. A lot of these people were together as prisoners of war. They have worked together in UN peacekeeping. So it's a very broad-based military to military engagements of India and Poland, which you saw in the early of 2000s, led to enormous strong peace defense cooperation. MOU was signed in 2003. So it's a very broad-based defense and economic cooperation. So all I'm saying is let's keep in mind that it's a visit to Poland, which is a very important bilateral relationship. Kiev will be happening tomorrow, day after.
Yes. All right.